Tell us about what you do and what a music supervisor does.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for having me here. It's an honor to be here. It really is. Music supervisor is multifaceted. It covers a lot of different territory. It covers music publishing, it covers records, it covers administration, it covers legal stuff, it covers music clearance. You wear a lot of hats, and you have to. There's a lot of different masters that you have to respond to. There's production companies, there's studios, there's network people, there's producers, directors, and so it's kind of a difficult balance to balance all that stuff. But it's really rewarding, and I'm lucky to be one of the few music supervisors actually making a living doing it. I think music supervision, it's probably one of the toughest jobs I've ever had, and I've worked at a studio, I worked at a music publishing company, I've worked at various studios, and music supervision it's complex because everybody loves music. So, most people love music. That's the reason that I got into this thing, other than the fact that my family's been involved with it my whole life. Music is one of those things that, it sets your soul free, it's one of those things that makes us happy, makes us sad, does all that stuff, evokes all those kind of emotions that are human, so when you talk about music supervision and people say, well, how do you do your job? Well, it's a lot of different things, anybody can sit down and marry a piece of music to a piece of film. I'm sure a lot of us have done it in our heads, and you think, well, you hear a song and you say, well, that would be an amazing piece of music to lock to a film or a television show. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the actual inner workings and the mechanism that makes all that happen. You have to call people to get the song cleared, and there's publishers that charge you money, and there's budgets that you have to, adhere to, and so it's a very complicated piece of business. It really is, and on any given day, it's one of those jobs where, at the end of a day, you're either incredibly gratified or you say, why am I doing this? Why did I choose this? And so it's just, it's one of those things that, it's the yin and the yang of the entertainment business. There's good and bad to all this stuff. So basically, I got into this thing because, I was born into a family that's a musical family, musical business family, not a musical family, a musical business family. And we were talking, and I said, because he asked me how I got into this thing, and we had like these amazing people at our house when I was a kid. Like I grew up with Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller and Phil Spector, and not that I'm proud of having Phil Spector in my house, because right now that's not really a great thing to mention. But these are all like amazingly creative people, and so I grew up in that kind of environment, and I was spoon-fed all that stuff. And I grew up like 4 or 5 years old listening to the Coasters and Elvis Presley, and the amazing thing that's happened for me is I get to work on this show that's actually being produced here. It's a mini-series called Elvis, it's amazing to me how all that stuff works, how the cycle just keeps going. So, anyways, I got into this thing because, like I said, I love music, and what happened for me was, I was a hippie, and I went to Humboldt State University and studied cannabis sativa, and came back to Los Angeles and got a job at Columbia Pictures as a music coordinator for film and television. And this was before soundtracks were popular. It was like late 70s, and it was before the the incredible boom of soundtracks. It was before Saturday Night Fever and you know, all of those marketing tools that were used as templates to help sell your movie as well as help sell your soundtrack album. So I moved from there and went to work for a company called American International Pictures, which was the king of B movies. It was Sam Markoff, and he produced all these amazing B movies, you know, like Teenage Werewolf and all that shit, you know, so we had a deal with Casablanca Records, which was at the time Neil Bogart's company, who had, you know, Donna Summer and Kiss and, you know, all the disco people, and so we put out a bunch of records, and because it was, again, like I said, there was this incredible explosion with soundtrack albums, and everybody wanted their artists on records and in films because it helped promote them, and et cetera, you know, the drill. And I then went to work for a music publishing company called CBS Songs, which is now EMI Music. The guy who ran CBS Songs, a guy by the name of Mike Stewart, called me up and said, "Listen, we bought this catalog from MGM, which was MGM Films, and they had this huge music publishing catalog. And he said, we need somebody to help consult, and you know, we need to get and exploit this stuff into films and television." And as a music publisher, they weren't doing that. They did it, but it was kind of, you know, it wasn't proactive. So they wanted somebody to do it on a proactive basis. So they called me up, and I went over there and started to work all this stuff. And one thing led to another, and you know, they hired me permanently, and that turned into another job. And I went to work for my brother, who Jerry knows, and I went to work for Warner Brothers, which then became Warner Chappell. And from then, I got a call from a guy who was running Lorimar Television, and they wanted to upgrade their music for their television shows, and they wanted it to become more contemporary. And so they hired me in the beginning of 1990. So I went to work at Lorimar, which then became Warner Brothers Television. And I got to produce the soundtrack for Friends. I got to have the song written. I did all those things, and got to work with, you know, this show called ER, and got to work with all these amazingly talented people. And what happened with Friends was, it was like this amazing story with Friends, because at the time there weren't television soundtracks, because record companies didn't believe in them. What they wanted was, record companies wanted the Big Bang, you know, they wanted Batman, they wanted Superman, they wanted, you know, what else, Star Wars, you know, all these huge soundtracks that were star-driven, you know, that were artist-driven. And so when they looked at a television show, television was always a stepchild, which is totally different now. And so I saw this amazing opportunity with Friends, and I went to this guy who was running Reprise Records at the time, Howie Klein, and I said, "Look, you have to look at this show, because the show's pretty amazing. It was before it came out." And I said, "There's this incredible opportunity for a soundtrack, because it appeals to the right demographic, and everybody thinks the show's going to be a huge hit. And I think what we can do is we can like intertwine a bunch of different artists and create like this great template, you know, and have a soundtrack album for a television show." And he totally got it. You know, he totally got it. He said, "Well, when you have a main title, you know, come back to me and we'll see what we can do." So what happened with Friends was, Kevin Bright, who was the executive producer, came to me and said, "Look, you know, we want to have a song written." I said, "Okay." So, "Well, what are we going to do?" I'm like, "Well, do you have a melody?" He said, "Yeah, I have a melody." I'm like, "Okay." So I said, "Well, we should probably go to Allee Willis, who is probably one of the most prominent lyricists I know of. I mean, she's written probably 75 or 100 hits and a bunch of stuff for Earth, Wind, and Fire, and just an amazing lyricist and song craftsperson, who, by the way, is now in the middle of writing a play for Broadway. She's doing The Color Purple, which is probably going to premiere on Broadway, I think, in the next 3 or 4 months. Anyways, Allie was retired, because Allie got into doing web work and doing all this stuff, and I called her up, and Allie's a really good friend of mine, and I said, Allie, there's this amazing opportunity. And she's gruff and, you know, she's kind of hard-edged. And she says, well, what's the opportunity? And I said, well, it's this TV show called Friends, and they need a main title written. So she says, okay, look, only for you. So she came in, she wrote the lyric, and then we had to find an artist. So we went through about 200 CDs, and the last CD that was sitting on my desk was this CD by the Rembrandts. And I gave it to Kevin, and he got it. He said, that's the band. And these guys were like, they were almost extinct. You know, it was almost over with for these guys. And so I called them up, and I said, look, you guys interested? Sure. So they came in, and we wrote this song called I'll Be There For You, and the rest is history, except for what happened with their record company. Because we wanted to release the single, and what happened was their record company realized that they were just getting ready to put out an album, and the album was obviously a stiff, and so what they tried to do was take this single and put it on their album. We didn't want them to do that, because what it was going to do was minimize what we were doing on our soundtrack album. So long story short, what happened was we agreed to let them put it on their record, and we also put it on our record. And what we did with our record, and the reason we got to make our record, was because we did what's called a favored nations deal with all these artists. We had amazing artists on this record. We had R.E.M. on this record. We had Joni Mitchell on this record. We had Chrissy Hynde on this record. It was just like this amazing record. We got really lucky, because what we did was we went to them with the theory that we were going to get Madonna. So Madonna said she wanted to do it. So we said, cool. Here's what we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you $12,500. And that's what we're going to pay everybody. So everybody agreed, because the linchpin was we had Madonna. So Madonna backed out. But we didn't tell anybody. We couldn't. So we still had this amazing record. And to this day, I mean, the album sold about 2.5 million units. But it was the beginning of, I mean, at least for me, I saw this amazing evolution in television soundtracks. Because what's happened today is, with the OC and the show that I work on, American Dreams, and One Tree Hill, and Smallville, and all these shows that cater to a young demographic, and it's all about music. What's happened is, because the record business has become, it's degenerated to a place where they don't know how to market artists anymore because of what's happened to them. And it's not their fault. They've imploded. I mean, the internet's caused like this whole maelstrom in the record business. And so what's happened is they've utilized this tool called television to help promote their artists. And as a result, all these artists now want to be on television. So it's the antithesis of what was happening 10 years ago. Nobody wanted to touch TV. It was the bastard stepchild. Now what's happening is it's a way to break an artist. Literally, it's become the radio of what used to be a playlist in the top 40s. Now, television now is used as a template to sell artists. Because if you have a show that reaches 10 to 12 million people a week, that's a hit of 10 to 12 million people that you don't have on the radio. You just don't. It's too hard to sell artists that way anymore. So, for me, it's this amazing kind of opportunity where I get to use all these up-and-coming artists and all my experience and all of my education to help, like, artists, writers, managers, friends of mine, all the resources that I've learned, and use all the tools. It's a lot of fun, and I get to make great music. And I think that's the key, is that it's one thing to just put music in a show or a movie. It's another thing to actually create music, which is what I've gotten to do, which is where I'm at now with this show that I'm working on called American Dreams, which is this show about, how many people have actually seen the show? Anybody seen the show? Not too many people have seen the show. Well, real quick, it's a story about a family in the 60s who live in South Philadelphia, and this girl's dream, she's 16 years old, the girl in the family, she wants to be a dancer on American Bandstand. And it's a look at, it's a snapshot of all the cultural issues of the 60s. You know, the race issues, the feminism issues, you know, everything. It looks at everything, because there's a white family and a black family, and then there's music. You know, music's again, the linchpin that makes all this stuff happen. So, when I got hired to do the show, Dick Clark's one of the executive producers, and again, Dick Clark's an old family friend of ours, and it was, you know, it was like old home week, and he's like this amazing guy, and has like the most amazing Rolodex you could ever want. You know, you can pick up the phone and call Paul McCartney, you know, and it's pretty amazing. So what we did with the show was we decided that we could displace new artists with old artists. In other words, we could take new artists, have them be old artists. And the first artist we got, here's what happened. I'll tell you the story. The executive producer is a guy by the name of Jonathan Prince, who I call him J.P. Barnum. He's like P.T. Barnum. He could sell snake oil to anybody. But he's like the most amazing producer. And he came to me and he said, look, here's what I want to do. I want to put Britney Spears on the show. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. He said, why not? I said, well, and this was 3 years ago. I said, because I think she's spent. I think it's over. And I think that, you know, it was when she took that self-imposed hiatus and was doing what she was doing, and whatever she was, I have no idea what she was doing. And so he said, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, let's give it some thought and see. Because the show sold itself because it's about music, and I'll show you some stuff in a second. And it's the amazing thing is how we use music on this television show. I don't think anybody's ever done it before. And so he came into the office and he says he had read this article in Time magazine, and it was about the three women of that summer, and it was Michelle Branch and Avril Lavigne and Vanessa Carlton. And he said, I want one of these. I'm like, oh, sure. And it happened to be that Michelle Branch's manager is a friend of mine, and he used to work with me, and I called him up on the phone, and I said, look, here's what we want to do. Is Michelle available? And he said, well, it just happens to be she's in town shooting a video with Santana, and give me the DVD and I'll show it to her. So I sent it over to him, and she called me back 10 minutes later, goes, I got to do the show. I have to do the show. And she was the first artist. So what we did was, we used her as our magnet. And since then, she played Leslie Gore. And she was actually kind of wooden. I mean, she didn't move much, and she didn't have much of a persona when she sang. But it didn't matter, because it was Michelle Branch. And she was afraid, and she was 19 at the time, but she was amazing. She was amazing because she got the most amazing voice. She can really sing. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were inventing this thing as we were going along. So we took her to the studio, recorded her, and did all this, and it was all synthesized stuff, and did it on Pro Tools, and none of it was real except her voice. So what we did with that was we used that for other artists. And since then, I've had 60 artists on the show. I had Usher on the show, who played Marvin Gaye, who's like his idol. This was 2.5 years ago. Lil' Kim, who was really a trip. She's very little. And height-wise, she's very little. And Alicia Keys, Chris Isaac, Alanis Morissette, God, the list goes, Brandy, the list goes on and on, Wyclef Jean. We just had all these people because the attraction for them is they get to play artists who are like mentors to them. Like Wyclef played one of the Impressions. And Alanis, what we did with Alanis was, and I'll show you what we did with John Andrasik, it's the same thing. I chased Alanis for 1.5 years, and because I believed that this show was a kind of thing that was perfect for who she is. And she said no, she kept saying no, I don't want to do another artist, I don't want to do another artist. And so I came up with this idea. I said, look, what about doing one of your own songs? Do you have a song that you think would be right? So she emailed me back and said, okay, I have this EP that I did that, didn't really do anything, but I had this song in there called Offer. And I think it might work for the show. So we went in and recorded it, and it was amazing. And she's on film for like 5 minutes, and it was an amazing experience. Because, again, it's, for me as a music supervisor, I get to take everything that I've learned and apply it to this art and this craft on the show that is a labor of love. I mean, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the hardest show I've ever worked on because there's so many elements to it. There's so much technical stuff that goes on that, the learning curve for everybody was huge. So we've also gotten to break some new artists, which is what we really get excited about. I mean, we've had Gavin DeGraw on, we've had Tyler Hilton on, we've had Toby Lightman on. We use them in different venues. We have the big artists who want to perform on Bandstand as artists that they admire. Like we just had John Legend on. John Legend played Stevie Wonder, and he was amazing. Stevie Wonder's like his idol, and the guy just knocks it out of the park. By the way, it'll be on a week from Wednesday. Recreating all that stuff, NBC has been very generous, because they want to see that stuff on screen. And as a result, we've gotten to go into the studio and we have it down to a science where we go in and we recreate the old tracks, and these people sing to them, then they go on stage and they lip sync. And so it's been this amazing evolution of that thing, which is American Dreams. We've done soundtrack albums and DVDs and all the ancillary stuff that goes along with that, and as well as me doing other stuff. I'm doing this miniseries called Elvis, which was the first time that the Elvis estate has actually let anybody use the original masters and have somebody lip sync to it, playing Elvis Presley. And it's, in terms of clearing the music, has been a nightmare because there's so much of it, but again, it's a labor of love. I mean, it's Elvis Presley, and I get a call from a producer, and he's like, you know what, we got to cut this corner because we need this, and we got to do this because we need the costume stuff. And I'm like, dude, here's the deal. You're telling the story of Elvis Presley. You want to cut corners on music? Why are you going to do that? That makes no sense. You're telling the story of the king of rock and roll. Why are you going to cut corners? And it was like, he got it. So those are the kind of things that you have to deal with. You have to deal with producers who, look, they have to spend money, but they also have to save money. And it's budget. So you have to remain within certain confines and certain constraints, and that's called a budget, and sometimes it's very hard to do. So part of what I do is when I look at a piece of film, which I'm going to show you in a minute, I'll show you what we did with who knows who John Andrasik is, the guy for Five for Fighting. You don't know who he is? Well, what we did was, John has this single that he just put out called If God Made You, and he played it. He wanted to be on the show, and he played it for us, and me and the producer flipped out because it's like this beautiful song. And what we do on the show is we weave the song into the story. of what's on the screen, and we do a pretty amazing job at it, you know. And also on the show is a band called I can't remember their name now. Totally blanked on their name. Fountains of Wayne. Who knows who Fountains of Wayne are? Cool. These guys wanted to be the Hollies, and again, these guys called me. You know, as did Joss Stone. And Joss Stone played herself, and that was a fairly interesting situation with Joss Stone. She would not go into the studio and sing. She wouldn't do it. Because she's so passionate about how her voice sounds live that she doesn't want to pre-record anything. And it's, I don't know if any of you know how complicated it is to shoot somebody with a pre-recorded track singing live. It's on a television show. It's incredibly hard, and she pulled it off. But she's got the most amazing voice. She's this 17-year-old English woman, blonde hair. She's about 5'11", who sounds like Aretha Franklin. It's bizarre, and we didn't know if it was going to work, but it was one of the most amazing experiences I've had doing the show. Was listening to her sing.
More typically, what do you do?
More typically, what'll happen is I'll get a call from either a producer or director or my agent telling me that there's either a TV show or a film that needs a music supervisor. And I'll look at a script, I'll go through the script, and sometimes music's scripted, sometimes it's not. And most of the time it's not. And what'll happen is we'll sit down and have a creative conversation. Where do you see the music going? What do you see the sensibility of the movie or the television show? What artists do you see? What composer do you want? I mean, music supervisor gets involved in all that stuff. So then we'll go to smash cut to the movie's being shot, rough cut. I'll go sit in an editing room with director. Producer's not there because the director gets his cuts first. And the big difference between movies and television is movies are director driven, television's producer driven. So it's a huge difference. So you sit in an editing room with the director and you go through the film and he'll tell you what he wants, and most of the time the editors and the director have put in some music that they like, and it's usually stuff that's incredibly expensive and unattainable, especially within the confines of their budget. You know, they'll put in Led Zeppelin shit, they'll put in all kinds of stuff, you know. And I can't tell you how many editing rooms I've been in where, you know, like 3-4 years ago, I heard the same fucking Moby song 50 times. And it was like they used the same thing. They all had this great idea about how it was supposed to be used, you know. So you'll sit there with the director and you'll go through a creative dialogue, you know, and it's the amazing thing about being a music supervisor is the ability to pick a song and match it to picture, and it changes everything. You can have a scene that's pretty flat and has no life to it, and you put a song to it, and it elevates it to another place. Because again, it evokes something in the human spirit that makes it like this different thing. It's a different animal. So you'll sit there and you'll go through the process, and it depends on, a lot of it depends on how focused the director is and how much he knows about music. I mean, because everybody's a musical expert. They really are, because everybody's got a radio in their car. So it's like, this guy will say to me, well, you know, look, I want Maroon 5. I'm like, well, dude, come on. It's like, everybody's going to use Maroon 5. You don't want to use Maroon 5. Well, I want to use Maroon 5. So you go down the road with Maroon 5, and by the time it's over with, it's like Maroon 5 is already done. You got to find somebody else. You know, so it's, again, you have to be ahead of the curve. You know, you have to know, at least in your own gut, what you think is going to happen musically in the next 6 months. And you have to listen and listen and listen and listen. You know, you just have to be aware musically as to what's out there, who's got what the indie stuff is, what the alt stuff is, what the hip hop stuff is. Hip hop stuff's really hard to cut to because there's so much vocal stuff. The tracks are great, but the vocal stuff interferes with dialogue all the time, so it's really hard to cut to, unless it's a montage where there's nothing going on except action, and you can use hip hop music really, really well. So that aspect of picking music for a film or a television show is more of what a music supervisor does than this. But I wanted to show you this because it's making music, you know, and I got lucky, but making music is why I got into this thing. You know, music is, again, it's this amazing art form, you know, so picking music's hard. It's really hard.
What if you just needed car chase music? What do you do with that?
Car chase music is you know, there's all kinds of stuff you can use. You can use techno stuff, hip-hop stuff works.
Where you don't have to use a name artist to do that.
No.
You can just go to a music library and...
You go to a library, there is such an abundance of guys and women that have created music in their home with the advent of Pro Tools and just the ability to make music in your house. There are so many libraries now, and there's just this abundance of resource that, you know, I just finished a movie, a little $6 million movie, for the guy who just produced $1 Million Baby. It's a story about this women volleyball team. They were women strippers who became a volleyball team, and they became like, but it's like, you know, you wouldn't think it's like a cool story, but it turns into like this really cool, like, you know, we succeeded. You know, we left our past behind and we became like these professional competitive volleyball people. And what we did was we went to these libraries and we made deals with all of them, and you know, there were 40 music starts in this thing, and we pared it down. We got it to 22 songs, and you know, we made amazing deals with these people because, you know, they all want their stuff used. You know, so we got 20 songs for $20,000.
Do you make those deals?
Mm-hmm.
So you take care of the licensing too?
Well, I don't take care of the licensing. I take care of the confirmation letters and the initiating of the licenses, and then they have their legal operation take care of all the licenses.
Well, if somebody wanted to get into this field, I mean, some of these students may find this interesting. Is there specific skills they should try to obtain?
Yeah, you know, it's music licensing and music clearance is a whole. It's an aspect of music supervision that nobody likes to address because it's paper driven and it's number driven, and not a lot of people like doing that kind of stuff. But if you want to get into that, you again, resources, relationships are important. Knowing music is important. Paralegal stuff might be a little important. Attention to detail is really important. Being incredibly organized is really important because there's a ton of paperwork. Although what's happened in the last couple of years is you don't have to fax anybody anymore, you just email them, you know, and so it's an easier way to do stuff. But it's a vital part of music supervision and music use in television and films, and it's a growing avenue for sure.
So how do you acquire the skills of knowing what music fits what, and how the music is going to enhance a visual? Mm-hmm. That's really what it's all about, mm-hmm. right? Is that just experience?
I think, well, part of it's experience, but I think that, like I said when I started, you know, we all sit and you know, watch a scene or listen to a song and we'll say, God, that's a great song for a film. Like, I don't know how many phone calls I've gotten going, you know, God, this is a great song for a motion picture. And I think a lot of it is gut. A lot of it is you know, creative instinct that you either have or you don't have.
Yeah, but you hear a song and you think visual?
Sometimes. Probably 75% of the time.
Interesting.